warrior and proud to be. But you see, those people are never fully educated. They never finish their education. Bannon was never taught to, like, he's discovered all this stuff about Evola and right-wing occultism, on his own. He was never actually taught properly how to read the intellectual history of the 20th century. And so he's ended up in this very odd place where, black becomes white, good becomes evil, and he's now replaying that card that Evola played. So that's why he calls himself a nationalist, and he uses that as a great term of, I'm a nationalist. I want nationalist economics, which is America first, America first. I want nationalist everything, which is very close to racist everything. And of course, then you have to define what you mean by the American nation. Well, that doesn't include those Hispanics. It doesn't include those Jews. It doesn't include those blacks. Whatever, you can see the way this goes. Which is why nationalism is a fake stop on the path to humanity, as Mazzini said, who was a genuine uniter of Italy. But Italy was a project on the path to humanity. It wasn't intended that the nation stops at being the nation. No, the nation is part of the internation of the community of peoples globally, which is what the European Union is. That's why some of the visionaries that founded the European Union were Italian. In their famous Ventonini manifesto, when during the war these liberal intellectuals had been imprisoned, but they were thinking, well, what can we do after the war to prevent this ever happening again? Well, we have to build the European Union, a family of nations in a sworn pact not to go to war with each other. Take the sting out of nationalism. And that was the plan. So, okay, another influence on Bannon, as revealed by Josh Green, is a man called Rene Guenon, who was a French intellectual. He didn't make the same mistake as Evola necessarily, but he did have some rather difficult consequences. And he was at war with modernity. He felt that everything that modern liberal democracies have achieved are somehow suspect. They need to be opposed and ultimately destroyed. And he searched for, the key to the ancient wisdom that could destroy modernity. And he had a restless intellectual journey. He started out as a Catholic in France. He was French, and he became a very traditional Catholic. Going to mass, supporting the whole thing. Because that seemed to be anti-modernist enough for him. But then he said, no, it's too, they even believe in democracy, etc. And no, that's not good enough. So he wanted something tougher. So he found it in Theosophy, which talked about an ancient wisdom that had been long suppressed. And maybe that would be the path. But no, that wasn't good enough for him. So he passed through that. He looked in Freemasonry, which has this hierarchical tradition of grades and so on, and he joined it. And no, that wasn't good enough. They were too liberal. They were too modern. And then finally he ends up turning to Islam, to Sunni Islam, and he became an Islamic convert. Lived in Cairo for the last years of his life, and he found in Islam, a sufficiently powerful anti-Western, anti-liberal Democrat, anti-modernist sword arm that he could identify with. And this is one of Steve Bannon's gurus, right? Bannon loves Guenon. When I read this, I was shocked, but also, it fits, because I think that Guenon, although a genius and a great thinker and so on, was wrong on a number of things, again, like Evola. For example, one of the things I think he was wrong at is because he was a literalist when it comes to Atlantis. Guenon believed, like many of these other right-wing occultists in the 20th century, that Atlantis was a real place, and that it was islands in the Atlantic which had collapsed, and that was the source bed for later civilizations, and that's very popular in the internet memes and in occult circles. Well, I'm afraid this is where I come back to rational spirituality. I've seen no evidence, personally speaking, for this argument. I've read all the mythological literature, Donnelly and so on. And I'm still not convinced there was an island called Atlantis. I think, along with Mary Settergast, in her book Plato the Prehistorian, I think that Plato was using Atlantis as a teaching myth. It was an archetypal thing about corruption and dabbling in dark forces, and that we have a duty, therefore, to stay on track as devotees of wisdom, Athena, and not be tempted down the Poseidon, power route. Plato was a master storyteller, and that's why I love him. But I don't think that he was saying, it was a real place. And I think that's a misreading. Also, Mary Settergast points out that it might have been a trace echo of ancient Magdalenian cultures off the Bay of Biscay, Spain, Cornwall. You could walk from northern Spain all the way to Ireland without getting your feet wet at a certain point in time. And they found evidence under the Atlantic Ocean there of advanced cultures who were, hunting, gathering, fishing, and eventually created cave art. They became the Magdalenian people. Now that, according to Mary Settergast, is the origin of the actual Atlantean people, and I agree with her. However, Guenon didn't. Guenon was a literalist. No, there was an island, and so on. And so, in his worldview, everything that we do now in the modern world is suspect and wrong, and we have to get back to the Golden Age, which he has the secret key to. And eventually, he said that Islam has the secret key to. Well, I think this is a misreading for two reasons. One is, I'm not an anti-modernist. I'm a graduate of the University of London. I'm a modern thinker, and I believe that the liberal democratic experiment that modern British and modern world and modern European society has explored is valid and important, and stands up against any fake Atlantean, it was better in the old times nonsense. Beccaria, the great Italian jurist, who was one of the thinkers of the Enlightenment, spoke against torture. He said, this is wrong. And he gave his reasons. He was an enlightened thinker, and I agree with him. I don't want to go back to a world in which torture is allowed. They used to do that in old civilizations. It was done in Islam. It was done in old Christian, Catholic, civilization that people like Bannon love. When the Armada was coming to Britain, it had the torture equipment and racks on the ships. The Inquisition was coming to land at Dover or whatever, and would have put, liberal thinkers like John Dee to the rack. They had a particular fierce brand of pseudo-Catholicism in Spain going, which isn't the real thing, in my opinion. Authentic Catholicism means universalism. And in the tradition that I come from, that's an ecumenical universalism, which is not the same as a kind of fanatical, heretic bashing type of ideology. I think the liberal democratic achievements like democracy, a democratic parliament, a constitutional monarchy, keep the trappings of the monarchy, but make sure it doesn't get out of bounds. I still think the Privy Council minutes should be, under freedom of information, accessible to the people, the public. I don't think we should have rule by a secret Privy Council. Parliament should have the final say in things like war making, and I totally oppose Theresa May's misuse of the Privy Council to justify the war against the bombing of Syria, when we destroyed Assad's Royal Society buildings, on evidence presented in secret to the Privy Council without our democratic representatives in Parliament being able to look at it, unless you're in the Privy Council. This is a misuse of and it's a betrayal of democracy. But, like I say, Bannon, Trump, and their ilk. Oh, Farage is very much part of this inner team, by the way. Another thing Josh Green reveals is that Farage and Trump and Bannon's, mutual adoration society goes back so far that Farage had commissioned a painting of Steve Bannon dressed as Napoleon, with the hat and the whole thing, which is hanging in Steve Bannon's home in New York. So God, these people are really crazy. They're having like a mutual warrior adoration society, and Bannon is the spider at the centre of this web. Now Farage thinks he's Napoleon because he's trotting around Europe now, whipping up all the extreme rightists to do a coup to take down the European Union because it's too democratic for them. It's too modern. God, it gives women equal rights. It gives workers' rights. In the social charter, unemployed people get rights to have support and so on. No, this is ridiculous. Let's do a Napoleon. Let's smash the whole thing. That's where Bannon, Farage, Trump and co are coming from. And I say to them, look, go home. We don't want that nonsense here in Europe. We've tried that warrior route in the 1920s and 30s. That's when we had our Mussolini moment. Thank you very much. We don't want to go back there. Very dangerous, and stop, whipping up this right-wing nonsense. Hitler, Himmler, Goebbels were all avid fans of Evola, and they believed in this warrior creed. That's why they founded the SS. Himmler thought, we'll have this elite corps, which will be great warriors that all swear oaths and, drink blood and have weird insignias on their uniforms. Well, they were behind the Holocaust, my friends. They were thinking they were doing their duty by slaughtering these non-Aryans. Well, those non-Aryans were some of the wisest, most beautiful, incredibly advanced souls that have ever incarnated on this planet. And they were just slaughtered because they were in the wrong type of bodies. That shows you the intellectual poverty of those people then, the Hitler, Himmler, Goebbels types, but also their latter-day followers, the Trump, Farage, Bannon types. And this, my friends, is the project behind so-called Brexit. Brexit is Britain committing suicide by betraying our intellectual heritage, which is, love, ultimately, and equality and freedom of thought, freedom of discussion, what I'm doing, freedom of enlightenment, ultimately, which is free access to the highest wisdom that we can. By all means, study all these people, but keep working on. I would say if Bannon was in my university and I was his tutor, I'd say, look, that's fine. Go and do an essay on Evola and co. But then look at the critiques of them. Look at where they got wrong, and look at maybe why we still do actually need Brahmins to run society, and Druids, and sages, and seers, and Buddhas. So anyway. That's why we need, I think, a renewal of liberal democracy in the West and in the European Union. In Britain, we need, I think, a written constitution, which is something the Liberal Democrat Party, which stands for these values I'm articulating, have been calling for a long time. I think it's long, long overdue. And I'm delighted. I don't know who's going to win the Liberal Democrat leadership election. Jo Swinson, who's an amazing young woman, or Ed Davey, who's a more experienced, figure, and either of them will be superb. And I hope the other one will act as deputy leader to whoever's elected, because we need them both in a sense. I want to talk briefly about the Tory seizure of power that's been going on. And what this Tory party is doing behind the scenes and why they're putting Boris Johnson in. It seems to me that it's a cynical seizure of power. And it's coming up very shortly. The Prime Minister, Theresa May, is only Prime Minister for 2 more days, effectively. Today is the 21st of July when I'm speaking. Tomorrow is Mary Magdalene Day, 22nd of July. On the 23rd of July, which is Tuesday, the new leadership of the election of the Tory party will be announced. Everyone expects Boris Johnson to win. And then on the 24th of July, Wednesday, she'll do her last ever parliamentary, Prime Minister's questions, go to Buckingham Palace to resign. That's on the Wednesday. So this is all happening in the next literally 4 days. And then we'll have Prime Minister Boris. Oh dear. I find it astounding and incredible that the Conservative Party thinks it has the right to do this. It obviously doesn't have the support of the nation. It has a tiny number of... I mean, it gets abysmal results in the election results. Obviously, these people, they think of themselves like a business, and they want to put Boris Johnson in as a sort of new commander-in-chief who's going to rally support. He's more charismatic than Theresa May. And they hope they'll, boost in elections. His policy is this kind of fake nationalism, which is to push Brexit. The man is seriously morally challenged. If that's what his great idea is. I mean, he himself realised before he came down on the side of Brexit, he knew in his best mind that Remain was better and reform. He doesn't believe in what he's doing. It's just a business opportunity for him, and it's a way of augmenting his wealth, which is increasing because when you lie in today's world, the military warrior class that are trying to take over the entire world, they fund you, they like you. And if you're a useful idiot for them, like Boris is, or Bannon and Farage, they're also useful idiots. What's going on behind the scenes is the military-industrial intelligence complex, who are promoting figures that will bring division, that will bring chaos, will bring conflict, and will unleash wars. That's their plan, and has been, for quite a long time. What I'm saying as a Druid, as a intellectual, as a Brahmin working for peace globally with my colleagues in all countries, is the people actually, and authentic voices of rational spirituality, have to take back power from these people and put a cap on their activities. This is why I've called for the nonagon symbolically to be built. When we had the Leonardo da Vinci Memorial Day here and went to Amboise and communed with Leonardo's spirit, it came to me that if Leonardo da Vinci were alive, he would say, look, the answer's architectural, aesthetic. This Pentagon thing is causing billions, trillions of the world's collective wealth to go up in smoke, being spent on weapons and military-industrial intelligence complex. Well, put a lid on the damn thing. It's gushing with like a crazy thing gone mad. And it's always generating fake information that can then launch, attacks like they're trying to do against Iran at the moment, having done their fake attack against Iraq based on a fake attack of 9/11, all of which were sort of dreamed up in the Pentagon, it seems to me, with help from British so-called intelligence. No, enough of all that nonsense. We have to take back power from these military intelligence industrial elites who organise these fake wars to keep us all terrified, and that's why no one has any money, because it's all going to the military and their intelligence cronies. That's why Assange was such a danger to them, because he cracked the code, he saw what was going on behind the scenes, and he had the technical abilities to create WikiLeaks. That's why they're desperate to shut him up and incarcerate him away for life, and he'd probably die of some illness before you could blink. Well, no, free Assange, give him the Nobel Peace Prize, and let 1,000 Assanges come forward and expose the shenanigans that have been going on behind this military-industrial intelligence takeover of the planet, and of which Brexit and American nationalism are the latest, episode. So, no, we have to oppose it, and I'm hoping very much that British Liberal Democratic parliamentarians of all varieties, the proper Labour members, who aren't just fanaticising about whether or not they can be, what their policy should be about Israel and the Semitic tradition. I've told Jeremy Corbyn he should come out as a Philo-Semite. The only answer, the antidote to this whole witch hunt over whether you're anti-Semitic or not, the only solution is to say, well, look, I'm a Philo-Semite. I love the Semites, as I do, but I also love all of them. I love the Israelis, I love the Hebrews, I love the Jews. They're all different varieties, and the people of Galilee were Galileans. They weren't Jews. The people of Judah were the Jews. Galileans 200 miles north, different people. Christ was a Galilean. He wasn't a Jew in the terms that they were used at that time. But they were all Semites. They were all people who heard the word. Shem a Shemite is someone that has heard the word. And the Shema, which is the prayer that a pious, proper observer of the Shema tradition does, is to say, look, hear, O Lord, here Israel is one. There are variants of how you translate it, but it means that all people that hear that word, that hear the Shema, that hear the Shem, the sound, dwell in that unity. Okay, and you can call it the sound current. In Sanskrit, they call that the shabd, which is similar in sound. It's what we use onomatopoeically when we tell someone to shh, shh. It's listening to that shh of silence. And in my book on the Kabbalah runes, I explain these common origins of sound and meaning. So, so if you're a Philosemite, you're trying to find that common sound from which we all descend. Be we, from whatever nation. I mean, here, I've sat in the United Nations headquarters in the meditation room there and done silent meditation for peace. And my colleagues, Steve Nation and many others, still keep alive that work. Dag Hammarskjöld was one of the greatest of UN Secretary Generals who was aware of the spiritual dimension of the work of the UN. That's the universal sound current that we need of peace. And all these nations, Israel, America, Britain, Scotland, France, we are all just like notes in one great symphony. Beethoven, who's one of my favourite musicians, who wrote the music that is Europe's national anthem, the Ode to Joy, he went deaf, he couldn't hear, but he could hear in his mind's sound, inner sound. It's one of the miracles of musical history, and that's someone that can hear the sound current, someone that is a lover of that common sound. And that to me is what a true Semite is. And so, Jeremy, if you're listening, just stop going down the road of trying to defend any kind of anti-Semitism, because it's a lost cause. You can't. And it's not good enough to be anti-Zionist. We should be Philo-Semites. We should also be universal Zionists. There's nothing wrong with the Zion project. It's there in Isaiah. It's there in all the great, Jewish thinkers, Isaac Luria, the great Kabbalists of Safat, and so on. We should all be trying to build an authentic Zion, not a Zion that becomes a nationalist state which persecutes other people and minorities. My friends from Israel, people I know and love and cherish, they're universalists who want a Zion that will be part of the peace plan for all humanity. That's what we should be building, and that should be big enough to bring peace for the Palestinians, for all the people of the neighbouring regions. Israeli intelligence should be rebranded as peace intelligence. They should stop doing any kind of assassinations or destabilizations of countries, and just use love, which is the core of the wisdom that Israel is actually founded on. The love of Yahweh, which is the name for that common ultimate sound current. So, so when I'm afraid Steve Bannon goes down and says, I'm a Christian Zionist, or Boris Johnson gets up and says, I'm a great Zionist, they're not. They're fake Zionists, because they're not doing the right thing that will actually help peace in the Middle East. By breaking up Britain, first and foremost, because Scotland's going away, Northern Ireland, Britain will be finished after Brexit. How's that helping us help our friends in the Middle East? Secondly, by destabilising the European Union, how is that helping the European Union with its peace message for both Israel and Palestine to make peace, which is our duty as Europeans? After all, the Holocaust happened here in Europe because people listened to Evola and the nationalist, fascist, military thinking. And yes, some Israelis even were tempted by that. And there's evidence in a very sad book by the former secretary of Bertrand Russell, Ralph Schoenberg, which I've studied and have, that yes, some of these Israeli leaders in the 20s and 30s thought, well, I know, we'll be Israeli fascists. And they were courted in Mussolini's court and to some extent by Hitler, because they thought, well, if we back these right-wing people that are taking over, then we can then copy them and have an Israel that's built as a sort of fascist state in the Middle East, and they'll fund us. And if they manage to take down our enemies, the British Empire, because those extreme right-wing Israeli Jews wanted, a little sort of neo-fascist Israel to be built. And Schoenemann presents evidence for this kind of collusion that was going on, which as a historian I can only say is, is not surprising, because they were revisionist, people that wanted to attack the liberal democratic traditions of Britain, and they wanted to carve out their own state. So the Palestinians saw what was going on, hated them, and there was absolute hell unleashed. There were riots going on in the streets of Jerusalem, and elsewhere, massacres on both sides. Well, I would have said, as a peace thinker, calm down, everybody. One of the great philosophers of modern British history, Samuel Alexander, was there trying to bring peace. He was governor of Palestine for a time. I think he founded the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. We should have got more peace thinking between these people, Palestinians and Israelis, even then, when Britain was still running that whole region of what was called Palestine. But it's not too late to try and get a peace deal now. But how will breaking up Britain help that? How will breaking up the EU and destabilising it help it? It won't. That's not... So the kind of Zionism I believe in, a universal peace Zionism, which is friendly to Judaism, friendly to Christianity, friendly to Islam, and all-inclusive, and wants a universal peace for mankind, that's inspired by that universal philosophical position I'm coming from, that won't be supported and helped by Brexit or the destruction of the EU. In fact, Britain as a whole, European Union as a whole, can help advance peace if we adopt peace policies, whereas if we collapse into fractured, warring nations again, the warriors will be laughing all the way to the bank, as they're doing. And Boris Johnson and their cronies, Farage and Bannon, these are their little lackeys. Like in the old cartoons, the money bags, the guy that runs away, the robber. That's what they're doing. Well, I'm saying no. I also want to talk about Mary Magdalene in another respect. Last year I gave a lecture about comparative diabology, and I talked about the demonic element of Mary Magdalene's story, that she was possessed by devils that Christ was able to free her from. I've thought about all this. You see the Evola types are demonically possessed. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Hitler, many people have said that they were. And they unleashed these demons onto Europe, which then led to Auschwitz and the incalculable horrors against Russia, against the Soviets, who were trying to find a way forward to reconcile their ancient, culture with modernity and so on. And Schmidt, the lawyer behind the Nazis, said you don't have to regard them as human beings. You can just massacre them, kill them. They have no rights. They're not human beings. They're Untermenschen. Now Schmidt has inspired this whole neoconservative right-wing movement in America. They all read Schmidt and say essentially these people don't have rights. That's why the Brexit, Bannon, Johnson type, and Theresa May played along with them. I don't think she realised what she was doing, but she was the instrument of them. Remainers have no rights because they may well be like half the people of Britain, in fact more now, but they don't have rights because we have decreed, like Schmidt did against the Bolsheviks, that they don't have rights. They're not human. Unbelievable what's been going on. So yes, it is demonic. Now, what are demons? Well, you can listen to my talks about comparative diabology and about Mary Magdalene, but I think they're thought forms that kind of obsess one's psyche. I've dealt a lot as a counsellor and a therapist, analytical therapist, with people that are subjected to possession by thought forms that get out of hand, and people who have obsessive thoughts, demonic thoughts. These are equivalent to demons, if you want. Now, I think that Brexit is one of them. That what these sort of dark forces do, which is the military, the warrior class, who've got out of hand, have stopped taking instruction from their spiritual elders, have stopped listening to their druids, have stopped listening to the authentic spiritual elders on this planet, which I'm working with. We've created this thing, Wamask, this council, this messianic Seashant Avatar Council, to try and bring together the authentic spiritual elders of the planet into a common discourse. The Dalai Lama, who's been invited to come onto that council, he's just had a big conference in Dharamsala about education and the failure of education to actually educate people morally. Dalai Lama says, 100% agree with him, the trouble with education is it's become obsessed with numbers, and it's all about ranks and leagues and numeracy and can you prove that you're better than me, and the only kind of knowledge that's justified in contemporary academia and contemporary school systems is numerological number kind of knowledge. So maths departments always have the best funding. Well, that's his point, and it's a very important point, and listen to us talk about that recently in the last week in Dharamsala. I agree with it. I agree with Rene Guenon as well, because he made the same point in his book, The Reign of Quantity, where he critiqued this obsession with number. What I don't agree, however, is that that's all doom and gloom, because as a Pythagorean from the European classical philosophical heritage that I come from, we know that number is only like a facade on a deeper kind of thinking. Number is a sacred thing, and number is an archetypal way of presenting the complex realities that tantric philosophy, Buddhist, Hindu, Druid explains in more detail. It's the relationship between the one and the two and the three and the four. They make together the tetractys, which is the Pythagorean symbol of the 10. So I'd say no, we need a different kind of mathematics in our schools. We need, yes, numeracy, I love it, but we need sacred mathematics, which is philosophy. The philosophy departments in every school should be delivering lectures on Pythagorean and sacred mathematics. And I'd like to live in a world where the philosophy departments in our schools had at least as much funding as the maths departments, because their job is to teach ethics and morality to our kids, so they don't become little crazy warrior types who just set off bombs without thinking of consequences. No, we need proper ethical education, and that's why I've been so honoured and loved teaching in schools in Britain as a philosophy and ethics teacher for many years. So I think the solution to the demons, these obsessive thought forms that come, like Brexit, suddenly, 10 years ago nobody had ever heard the word, we didn't know what it meant. Suddenly it's breaking up our nation. It's a demonic thought form that's held in the minds of these obsessive types like Farage and Johnson. And that's what's demonic about it, because it becomes a sort of obsessive takeover of people's psyche. And Mary Magdalene had the same problem. How did Jesus cure her of it? Well, I think just by calming her down, by bringing her back to centre, by bringing her back to stillness, to that inner place of peace where you can hear the authentic voice of the Shem. You can hear the unity behind all the diversity. And that is the true Shem. That's the true name of the nameless. God's name can't be spoken because you have to hear it. Anything I say is just a pointer for your own hearing, so that you activate your inner